When I was in the woods, I found a few feet away from his body the thing that looked at first to be like a metal can through the brush. Well, it wasn't a metal can. Something that I've taken to call the link artifact. And I believe that that is a link between the wearer and possibly the obelisk, or the people that control the obelisk. And when I say people, I do not mean humans. I believe it is a multifaceted tool. I brought it home. I had it stored. I had it analyzed in Japan. And I had it photographed. And we have that videotape. And I can show you that now.
Welcome to part 2 of the Jonathan Reed Alien in the Freezer case. And this definitely needs a part 2 because there is a whole other element to this thing that I couldn't even fit in the first video. There was always going to be a part 2 because there's another part to this story that needs to be talked about. And you guys have also had a lot of questions in the comments on X about this story. It's very divisive. It's one of the most compelling cases, yet at the same time, not a lot of people know about it. So we're going to be digging into this a little bit deeper today, specifically on another element of this story, and that element is the link, which is this metallic wrist guard that Jonathan Reed believed was not only a communication device, but also had teleportation capabilities. This is something that he found alongside the alien body when he took it home. And these teleportation capabilities are something that he demonstrated himself on television. And we have that clip to look at today so you guys can decide for yourself. But before we get to that, I want to paint a picture of the link for you guys. So I'm going to give you a bit of a rundown of this artifact. We're going to connect some more dots like we did last time. We've also got clips from Jonathan Reed's Art Bell interview in 2013 where he's going to paint a lot of the story for us. We've also got witness testimony to the teleportation and questions from the public about it. By the way, my name is Josh. Welcome to Polarity. If the deep and weird questions about the universe are what gets you excited, then make sure you hit subscribe because that's what we do here and we can try and answer them all together. Now, before we dig into the link, I want to answer pretty much what was, I would say, the most popular question after part 1 of this video. And that is, what happened to the alien? And somebody actually asked Jonathan Reed that on the Art Bell show. So I'll let him tell you himself.
We've got to close something out here because at this point, of course, the alien, when we last heard, was alive.
Yes.
What befell? What happened to the alien?
During the rest of the days before I left town, left the country, I would go back into the garage and I would open the freezer and it became familiar with me, I think more than I was with it. It at least no longer screamed at me.
Right.
But it would now make little chirpy, squeaky sounds, and I would talk to it like I was talking to my dog, like I was talking to a member of my family, just to try to get it to calm down, to try to reassure that I wasn't going to attack it, because now it was a living thing. It was much different, and it was injured to me, and it was moving slowly, and it wasn't being aggressive toward me. It was liking its environment, if you can imagine that.
I guess I can.
And
freezer.
And it was ready. It could leave any time. I did not lock it in the freezer. It actually would get out of the freezer on its own, sit in front of the freezer, kind of rock back and forth in a very fluid motion, and look at me with these big 2-inch oval eyes and almost peer into my mind. It started to communicate through telepathy. It started to reach inside of me, and I could see images of my life as a child, as a young man, as if it was playing them to me like a movie in my mind. But so vivid and so clear that I could feel the air. I could feel the grass under my feet. I could smell it.
Wow.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And this went on for how long?
Until I left town on the 10th day.
And the alien?
Well, on the 9th day, I came back home, drove home from my house after being with Gary for a while. And I drove home in the evening, and I drove up to my house, and I found that there were 2 vans parked up on my lawn with men going in and out of my front door with, dollies taking things out of my house. So I didn't want to stop, so I went somewhere else and came back later and found that my house had been totally ransacked, totally destroyed. They had probed the walls and the floor and the ceiling. They had taken the toilet off of the floor mounts. There was water spewing everywhere. They had probed the grass in the lawn looking for things with some kind of object. There were holes in the grass. I went to the garage, and the freezer was gone. They had
the freezer, the whole freezer.
The whole freezer was gone. Also, some other things that didn't make any sense. They had taken a whole cord of wood that was piled in the garage. Okay, they had taken.
Well, you know what? If some government agency, whatever it would be, became aware that you had this, yeah, I understand. It would disappear. A lot of things in your home would disappear. Sure.
But Art, what I found when I went to that garage, when I saw what I saw, there were small, frosty, wet footprints going across the floor and to the wall, stopping like it walked through the wall. It didn't go to the door. It didn't go to the other big door, which had been pried out of the wall with pry bars. It just went to the wall. And I thought maybe he got away.
Okay, so if you've only found out about this case from watching part 1, you might be a little bit confused there. And that is because the story goes that this non-human intelligence was dead in his freezer. But after about 4 days, he started to hear noises and realized that it was actually still alive. And there's a whole other story there, and you should really listen to the whole interview to get that full picture. But essentially, after a few days, it became sentient again. And this all took place between 9 days from the point of him bringing it home until the 10th day, which was when Jonathan fled the country. And there's a whole kind of story on what happened after that. But if you actually go back to part 1 and look at the footage of Jonathan filming this entity on the floor of his garage, you actually see it blinking slowly. So he actually realized after the fact, when he thought this thing was dead, it wasn't. So what's crazy is that Jonathan claims that this being is still alive and out there, and that he intermittently still sees it to this day. It just kind of will randomly, sporadically appear and visit him, and they will exchange some kind of telepathic communication. But what's crazy is that the witnesses to this case, there's a handful of people who've allegedly seen this body, who've seen the link artifact, who've seen the teleportation, and we're going to be hearing from them soon. They claim to have seen this being too since this happened. Okay, they kind of all claim that this thing shows up in their life sporadically since then. I know it's crazy. Now, in the last video, I kind of went full Charlie, highlighting all the similarities in this case that kind of relate to other famous encounters and mass sightings that we know about around the world. And in the research for this video, I found a couple more. So I want you guys to check these out.
Somebody's asking, was there a smell?
Yes, there was. It had a terrible pungent odor that I have decided that it's similar to rotting fruit. The odor of rotting fruit.
Right.
And it wasn't pleasant, and it was always there. And it didn't even seem to diminish much, even after it had been in the freezer for a couple of days.
Esse cheiro é cheiro forte, misturado com tipo de enxofre ou amônia. Por mais que fosse lavado, desinfectado, o cheiro permanecia no setor.
Ao descer do carro, eu já senti imediatamente cheiro de amônia, parecia ovo podre, que tive de tampar o meu nariz com...
Não sei de onde saiu aquele cheiro. Cheguei a lavar meu nariz com álcool e água para sair aquele cheiro. Forte. Não, pior do que enxofre.
Eu não sei, porque o
cheiro forte aqui, ó. Que cheiro mais... Ó, eu tô tremendo. Quer ver? Um dedo. outro dedo comprido e outro dedo assim, ó.
Menor.
So there's that. Okay, and remember, the Varginha, Brazil case, what Moment of Contact is about, happened in 1996. It's the same year as Jonathan Reed's case. And obviously, Varginha, Brazil is not the only case that has reported terrible smells when they've come into contact or close proximity to these non-human intelligence. So moving forward, let's get into the main source of this video, which is this link artifact. This is one of the most hotly debated parts of this story, and for good reason. I mean, I left it out of part one because it needs its own video, because there's a lot to it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview first, okay? So this thing is often referred to as the link artifact, or even just sometimes it gets called the link. It's basically a chrome gold metallic looking bracelet device with 3 sharp needles or sort of prongs on the inner side. And on the outside, it's got these Egyptian sort of strange looking hieroglyphic symbols. So the 3 sharp needles there, according to Jonathan Reed, they puncture the skin, and they then sort of interface with the person who's wearing its nervous system. Okay, this is just going from what Jonathan Reed has told us. He believes that it acts as like a universal translator, or something that can just communicate consciousness directly. It can allow thought form exchanges with any other kind of sentient conscious being. You don't need language, just your consciousness will translate directly. That's what he believes that this thing can do. He says it emits a strange vibrational field when it's worn. It induces temporary health effects like nausea, blurred vision, chest pressure, and tunnel vision. And most importantly, it allows teleportation, a dimensional shift. When activated properly, it triggers involuntary body vibration before phasing out of normal space-time. Which, interestingly, if you remember in part 1, he said when he saw this being, it was doing this weird vibrating. Now, important to mention that some people who've tried to wear this, according to Dr. Jonathan Reed, suffered severe illness or even death eventually. And he gets into that a little bit more in the video. Now, what's interesting is that, like he said, the United States did not want to help cooperate. They basically made his life hell, but almost every other country was willing to help him and cooperate. And he got this artifact tested at Osaka University in Japan in 1999. There was X-ray, metallurgical, and biochemical analysis done, where they found layers of silicon, polymer, beryllium, aluminium, magnesium, copper, zinc, bismuth, gold, and one unidentified element. And this was all put together with a micro-layered structure, like a biological leaf or plant material. So this is very similar to what we've heard about when we've seen these pieces of UAP material that have been analyzed, where they say they're basically perfectly atomically layered atom by atom. And the way that I've heard this, an analogy for this is basically like you could fill up a bucket by just dumping a bag of sand in it, and that would work, which is kind of what we have with the way we have like iron and copper. But this material, it's as if the sand has been placed grain by grain perfectly on top of each other to fill the entire bucket. Okay, that's a way you can kind of maybe imagine the difference when people are talking about this sort of micro-layered material. And they basically concluded it to be part biological and part technological. So this is like some kind of organic biomechanical technology. Now, before we go any further, I need to point out a few more similarities, because you know that's just what I do. Okay, it's what I like to do the most, and it just seems to happen every time. So at this point in ufology, ancient Egyptian and Greek-looking hieroglyphic symbols are just no stranger in the realm of UFOs and just paranormal in general, right? Because not only do we have these symbols up here that have been seen on the exterior of multiple craft sighted over the years, Rendlesham Forest, Lonnie Zamora in Socorro, New Mexico. These are the symbols that Danny Sheehan allegedly saw on the edge of a craft when he had the chance to look at the Project Blue Book files. But at the bottom here, we're seeing allegedly similar symbols that are showing up when people are looking through a diffracted laser shined on a wall after they ingest DMT. Now, I know there's a lot of steps in that one, but this is an experiment that's been replicated time after time by a man named Danny Gola, and the results don't change. And these have been like double-blind experiments, and people are all seeing the same thing. It's very, very wild. But to take the parallels to this link up another level, let me bring you back to this Jesse Michaels episode from late last year. Now, I'm wondering if any of you are already clued on to where I'm about to take you, because some of you, I'm sure, remember when Green Beret Randy Anderson described being taken deep underground in a military base and being shown a gauntlet-like artifact where it had these same type of symbols essentially projected in front of him.
So we spent a little time there, and then we went to the next object, and it was another metallic object, very, very strange looking, same type of vibe. It's hard to describe because it didn't get a full view of it, but it looked like something you could like reach in and grab and pick up, and maybe it was something that would you could put on your arm, or so something that would use it would have to use it with their arm. That's the best way I can describe it. And it had like a crystal type of display screen, or I don't know if it was a display screen. It was a square, rectangular, looked like it would potentially be a display screen, and it was sitting. It was not levitating. It was sitting on a table, and at that point, like I'm looking at it, and it almost looked like a mirage type of effect. And in that, above that display screen, were these hieroglyphic symbols that I started to see appear. And not only did I see the symbols, but they were like changing to different symbols. So there was a movement to them as well. So they weren't just like static.
So from memory, that experience that Randy Anderson is talking about there happened in around 2014, so nearly 20 years after the Jonathan Reed case happened. Now, obviously, it's not an exact match. There's no screen on this. There's no holographic projections of these symbols, but it's still a gauntlet-like wrist sort of device that is displaying Egyptian-style hieroglyphic symbols, which for me is close enough to find it interesting, and I think it's worth including and considering when we're looking at similar cases. Now, as I said before, Jonathan Reed claims that wearing this link device causes extreme discomfort, and before it activates its communication and teleportation abilities, he claims that people can become severely ill or even have died, right? So I think what we should just do is let's just hear from Jonathan himself. He will explain, he's going to explain exactly what happens when he wears it, where he goes, and what he sees when this teleportation event happens.
Somebody named Sam is coming through the wormhole and just asking, what was described to us, that you disappeared with that bracelet and then reappeared. Sam is asking, where did you go? Are you able to tell us where you were during that apparent teleportation?
Sure. I became very, very violently in the moment when I put it on. It becomes a huge pressure inside of my chest, almost what must feel like a severe heart attack. It radiates to my extremities. I start to lose my sight down to almost a singular or tunnel type vision that becomes almost black, and then all of a sudden it becomes completely clear. And I was in a large, oval, egg-shaped room, probably 50 feet high, 30 feet wide. And in that room was standing another entity, and I'm very careful about how I say this, that was probably 10 to 15 feet high, standing off the side of this wall, looking down on me. It was gold. It was large. It looked like it had big golden robe wrapped around it, almost like it had wings and a shape without a complete face. But in this second, when I was there, I was inside of it. It was inside of me. It was like being in the presence of an angel or God.
Did it communicate to you?
It communicated before I could even say anything. It was answering my thoughts. It was telling me, you are important. All life is important in the universe. There is one creator for all life, but we all have to work together to find the harmony in this life.
Now, these are obviously insane claims, right? But what I really do find interesting in a lot of these cases, Rua Zimbabwe comes to mind quickly, is that when people talk about the messages that they've received, usually always telepathically, they're always the same about humanity needing to unite, come together, back off technology a little bit, is always this same message, which I find really interesting. But obviously, these claims are pretty insane, right? Teleporting, appearing in a room with a giant golden 15-foot being that's communicating with him telepathically. Like, these are wild claims. But apparently, there are witnesses to this, right? Now, not only does Robert Wraith, who is the person here you can see who helped author Jonathan's book, Robert Wraith claims to have seen Jonathan do this himself. But also, UFO researcher Dan McAvoy vouches for this as well. Robert Wraith and Dan McAvoy both state that during a meeting with other witnesses in the room as well, Reed wore this link artifact and they watched his body begin to vibrate until he disappeared for about a minute. And then they say he reappeared, shaken and visibly ill. So, who is Dan McAvoy, right? So let's take a look and we can hear it from the man himself.
Dan McAvoy is a UFO researcher, has been for 20 plus years. He's a expatriate. He's an Army Ranger and paratrooper, has tremendous valor and honor and respect. And he volunteered to help research my case.
Okay.
To walk in my shoes, to walk alongside of me, to go prove to him that I was who I said I was, that my life, in fact, had been destroyed and torn apart. And so he did that. He did that for 2 years.
Just to give you a few seconds about my background briefly, I served in the United States Army as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division in an Airborne Reconnaissance Unit. After that, military advisor attached to JFK Center for Special Warfare at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. An expert in infantry weapons, small unit tactics, jungle warfare, and Arctic warfare. After that, I have owned my own business successfully now for over 10 years, a consulting firm. In addition to that, I've spent 10, 15 years researching and studying UFOs and extraterrestrials with an emphasis on contact experiences. I became involved 18 months ago after meeting Dr. Reed and hearing his lecture here at the International UFO Congress. I also followed the details on the Art Bell show and the internet. Dr. Reed and I became acquainted, and we agreed that I would do a textbook investigation of his case. He would provide me with unlimited access to his witnesses, evidence, and most importantly, himself. I would document my findings and then publish the results. This would be done no matter what direction or conclusion I reached. For me, this is one of the few times a contactee or experiencer has had more than an anecdote. There's a body of evidence that he brought back to examine. This included videotape, photographs made contemporaneously with the event. There were witnesses to interview, and most importantly, an extraterrestrial artifact. Something manufactured somewhere, but not here. A device that has the ability to teleport an individual to perhaps another dimension, another place. This device also allows for contact with other entities described best as beings of light. I had the personal experience of witnessing such an event. This artifact has also been analyzed by a variety of scientists, both in Osaka, Japan, and as well as in Mexico by a member of the Ames Institute of NASA. Any good student of the phenomenon recognized distinctive aspects of this encounter that have been reported worldwide. Among these are electromagnetic distortion, time distortion, and telepathic communication. There are also psychological and physiological symptoms consistent with the majority of close encounters. The actions of both Dr. Reed and the creature can also be found throughout the literature of contact. This case presents us with a Herculean challenge. If we accept the reality of the encounter, then we have to examine our current paradigms and realize that these are inadequate. We can also study the case for its importance to contact and realize as well that this case has been a lightning rod for reports by other contactees. We are receiving hundreds of new reports internationally. A fair number of these reports report similar structured craft and similar creatures that Dr. Reed has encountered. It would be a great disservice to ignore these reports, or worse yet, treat them as Dr. Reed had been treated over the past 6 years.
So when I found this, right, Army Ranger, paratrooper, UFO researcher for 25 years at that point, right? This is, about 15 years ago. When I saw this and he's talking about psychological effects, physiological effects with these beings or these UFOs, the same effects that we're hearing about today in 2025 that are kind of coming out into the mainstream, right? When I found this and Dan McAvoy, I was like, okay, military guy, 25-year history in UFO research. Admittedly, I'd never heard of him before, but this might be something solid, okay? Like this is someone solid to dig into and give this case some credibility. When you Google Dan McAvoy, there's not really anything. For someone who was apparently a UFO researcher for 25 years, the only thing that I can find about him at all is just this case. Nothing to do with his army career, nothing to do with UFOs at all, just this case. Now, look, I'm just a guy on YouTube, okay? I don't know everything about UFOs and aliens. Maybe some of you guys who are a bit older than me might know about Dan McAvoy, and if you do, get in the comments because I'd love to read more about him. But it doesn't seem like to me, from what I could find so far, that this guy seems to exist anywhere else. Maybe you guys can dig a little deeper, see what you can find, but I haven't had much luck so far. So whoever this ghost figure is, Dan McAvoy, he seems to be a real person on a screen, pledging his identity and reputation to the fact that not only is this case real, but the teleportation part is too. And we're about to watch that video. The context on this one is, like everything, is just so murky, right? Because there are reports, not only the whole weird Dan McAvoy ghost researcher part of it, but there are reports that this video that we're about to watch of this teleportation was a dramatization or a recreation of its effect. But I don't understand why that would be necessary if this thing is real. But according to ChatGPT, this is not a recreation. According to ChatGPT and Jonathan Reed and Dan McAvoy, this video is the real deal. Okay, this is apparently a video of Jonathan Reed wearing the Link artifact in front of a live audience on Mexican television and being teleported away and teleported back. You get to see the whole thing, and apparently this is exactly what you see is what it's meant to be.
This is what so many people have tried to say doesn't exist, or simply is a figment of someone's imagination. It has symbols across the front of it. This is what I found in the forest in 1996 when I first encountered the creature or the alien. I believe that it's some kind of bioelectric interface between the wearer of this device and the owners of it, that they actually activated. It has 3 needles on the inside that actually penetrate your arm, the wearer of this, that I think creates a interface, biological interface with the device and or the beings who use it. So my impression of it is that it's designed to keep control and communication between the extraterrestrial and their superiors. I believe it fits on your arm, the wearer's arm, like this. If you push down, the needles penetrate your skin, tissue, and into the nerves of your arm. There is some pain to it, but it quickly goes away. It becomes kind of a cold, almost a frozen type feeling. Very quickly that pain subsides, but if it functions, which sometimes it doesn't, it starts a throbbing inside your chest, literally a pulsation inside your chest that starts from the center and emanates to your extremities and becomes harder and harder. And then when that happens, then it starts to be activated by there. Now I can feel it. I can feel it in my chest. It's painful. But if I hold my chest, it has a tendency to be less painful. And then they make the decision whether
Yeah, it's a mind bender. It really is. There is so much about this case that we've looked at in the last video and in this one that makes me feel like this case is the real deal. But obviously that video just feels so dodgy. It looks dodgy and it kind of sounds dodgy too. Like the audio of Jonathan is very like tinny and low quality, but I mean also who knows how many times this has been ripped and re-uploaded. But the audio of Jonathan sounds very low quality and tinny. And then compared to the audience cheering at the end, that sounds a lot more crisper and clearer, almost like it's been overlaid. Now, I haven't done any audio analysis of that. That's purely just my ear, my immediate impression from listening to it. And, you know, when you're watching something like that, I feel like you automatically jump to the conclusion of like something isn't right here. But it just doesn't sound like Jonathan and the audience are recorded in the same room. They might be recorded with different microphones. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments and the video itself. But the way Jonathan comes across, you know, consistent storytelling for almost 3 decades, a story that's only ruined his career pretty much and essentially his life, really. A story that shares patterns with multiple other cases of encounters and sightings around the world, not just around the world, but also at the same time as that this was happening. You've got a strange ghost UFO investigator that kind of raises some alarms for me. But at the same time, we know that people's history and credentials can get wiped when they start looking into things that people don't want them to. This isn't the first time that we've seen that happen. And, you know, even the idea of teleportation doesn't totally push me away. But that video specifically is a tough pill to swallow, I have to say. Because if the video is fake, if this whole thing is a hoax, why would you try to create a dodgy ass video that is inevitably going to get debunked? That's just a dumb idea. But then if it's all real, why not do it again? Why not with a 4K camera? Because apparently he says he still has access to it. He says it's in non-communist Russia somewhere, another country who is willing to help him instead of the US. And that if he wants to access it, he can. So why not in 2025, with the current landscape of ufology kind of evolving, why not get someone like Ross Coulthart, News Nation, and a bunch of 4K cameras, do it again? And I'm sure Ross will make a story on it. Just like everything in this UFO world, I'm left feeling torn in two directions here. Because actually, I forgot to mention this. Recently, I found Dr. Reed did a podcast like 2 months ago. He was on a podcast, and I actually reached out to him to see if he would come on this channel, hopefully for this video. I only reached out to him after the last one to see if I could get him on for this one and ask him some of the questions about that video and about this whole case that we are all kind of dying to ask him. But I haven't heard anything back so far. I'll leave a link to that podcast in the show notes of this video as well, because it's recent. I'll leave a link to the Art Bell show as well. It's a long one, but you should definitely check it out. That's from 2013. He also went on Art Bell in 1998, I believe, as well. So there's another older episode you can check out if you really want to go deep on this case. But I am curious, how are you guys feeling about this one? I want to know, has your opinion changed after watching part one and then watching that? How are you feeling? Are you feeling torn like me? Are you still on board, or are you kind of calling it a bit sus now? I want to know how you guys are feeling, because I don't even know how I'm feeling right now. Like I said, I'll leave those links in the description. Check them out if you're interested, because you get much more of the story in full depth. But to take you guys out today, I'm going to play you some cool clips from the Art Bell show. All right, so that's going to wind up the show today. Be good, be kind, make sure you're getting out every day, touch some grass. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time.
Did the alien ever relate to you through telepathy or otherwise as to its possible origin and why it might have been in the forest that day? Why did you run into it? Did he hint to you in any way for the possibilities of this? Thank you for taking my question. I'll take my answer off the air.
Sure, it's a good one, too.
Yes, he did. After a period of years of communicating with this little guy, I have kind of built up some idea about how he formulates his communication. Mm-hmm. First of all, he's a genetically engineered worker. He is designed and built to do the same type of job that we would send a rover to do on Mars. But the only difference is he's biology. He was designed to be in our environment, in our atmosphere.
So he's like a biological probe.
Exactly. But he has all the sensitivities of a living person. He is alive. He is a living creature who has feelings and curiosities. He's very curious. But he doesn't have a great extensive knowledge base. I think it's designed so that it does a job. It was built to do a job. And for the most that we can determine that was something to do with geology of the area that I found him in. Right. That he was doing something to do with the Earth and the geology.
Because I remember when I first interviewed you, I think you would have undone it, but quick.
Well, that's what I said originally when it had torn my life apart. I was left with nothing. But in the last 10, 12 years, since I stopped publicly speaking, since I decided to basically court the science side of life one more time, I have been sought out by science groups and universities all around the world. I have spoken to heads of state and heads of countries about this. I was invited by the Vatican 1 month ago to speak with the new Pope.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Are you going to do it?
I've done it.
You did it?
I did it. Who told me, Jonathan, you are a messenger for all of us.
You spoke to the Pope?
I stayed in the Vatican for 4 days.
Holy smokes. No pun intended.
Incredible
you were invited? You were invited to the Vatican.
I was invited for two reasons. One, I had met the past pope when I was in the hospital in Mexico some years back, and he happened to be in Mexico. And he was visiting the hospital, and I had an opportunity to talk to him because I was sick in the hospital also. I had actually died for 19 minutes. And
you actually arrested? Physical
yes,
signs?
yes,
All that? Wow.
Yes. And
that's another subject I'm really interested in pursuing.
And he came to talk with many people, not just me, but he said that this is a good thing. He actually asked me, Pope Benedict asked me, how can we help them? How can we help the aliens?
Okay. Dark Matter, you're on the air with Dr. Reed. Hello. Hello. Yes.
Well, I'd like to ask Dr. Reed, was the alien wearing clothes, and did you feel them? Was he wearing shoes? How many fingers did he have?
Yes, he had a black suit on, similar to what I would reference like spandex, that was a one piece of material, no seams, no zippers, almost like a turtleneck type thing that covered his hands, his feet, his body, his legs, his torso, everything. What was unique about the suit is when he was unconscious in my garage, I did a topical examination of him, feeling through his suit, feeling my way to find out his fingers, that he had basically 3 fingers in like a glove or a mitten form, but inside there were 5 fingers. He had basically the same anatomy that a human would have, except some small additions. But then one thing was very interesting is I took an X-Acto knife and I attempted to cut the suit. And as I cut a 2-inch strip in it, it sealed itself up.
Oh.
And then I cut it again, and it sealed itself up again. And the third time, it wouldn't let me cut it at all.
Really?
And what's interesting about that, Art, is
it's almost a learned behavior, right?
5 years later, NASA came out with a press release that said 5 years later that they had invented a material that was a healing fabric.
Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on?
No matter how far you go into the dark, when you flip, you go exactly the same place to the light in our galaxy. Everything. Because everything is in balance. Everything is a polarity.
I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.